Hi guys, Ryan here. Today we're going to be taking a look at 10 things you might not know about the new Raspberry Pi Pico. Without further ado, let's get started. At number 1, the processor. The Raspberry Pi Pico uses the Raspberry Pi Foundation's new RP2040 chip, which is based on two high-speed ARM Cortex M0 Plus chips. It has a clock speed of 133 MHz, which is extremely fast when compared to the 16 MHz of something like the Arduino Uno. Number 2, machine learning. Due to the two fast cores on the new RP2040 chip, the Raspberry Pi Pico is great for machine learning. Pete Warden, an open source contributor in the community, has already created a port of Google's TensorFlow Lite codebase that allows you to run machine learning models on your Pico. This is great for things like voice recognition, gesture recognition from an accelerometer, or other data analysis tasks. The micro USB port on the front of the Pico is usually used to send power and programs to your Pico. However, it has much more advanced capabilities. The Pico can act as a USB device and send data into your computer to simulate things like a keyboard or mouse. The Pico can also be used as a USB host, allowing you to plug USB devices into your Pico and read inputs from them, such as keyboards and mice. The Pico can be programmed through C or C++ using the Raspberry Pi Pico SDK, and can also be programmed with Python using MicroPython through an IDE like Thonny. If you want to see how to get started programming your Pico using MicroPython, take a look at my first impressions video. Number 5, cost to develop. In a recent interview with Hackspace, Eben Upton, the Raspberry Pi Foundation's founder, said that the development of the Pico board cost them between £2 and £3 million. He later goes on to say, if Apple thought they could make great Macs with Intel chips, then they wouldn't be making their own silicon, comparing their decision to develop the RP2040 with Apple's decision to develop their own M1 silicon chips instead of using Intel processors in the new Macs. Before we move on to number 6, make sure to like this video if you're enjoying it, and let me know in the comments down below how many of these you already knew and how many were new to you. Number 6, debugging. When writing code for the Raspberry Pi Pico, you can hook up the debug pins into your GPIO pins on your normal Raspberry Pi to debug it. However, if you're writing scripts from another device, such as a Windows or Mac machine that doesn't have GPIO pins, then it's possible to use a Pico microcontroller to debug another Pico using the Pico Probe application. Number 7, low power. The Raspberry Pi Pico uses 10 times less power than the Raspberry Pi Zero when in full power consumption mode, and up to 100 times less when they're both in an idling state. Raspberry Pi Zero can consume a couple of 100 milliwatts of power, whereas the Raspberry Pi Pico can be beaten down to just a few milliwatts. In sleep and dormant mode, the Raspberry Pi Pico can draw as little as 1 milliamp of power and wait for inputs from the GPIO pins or the real-time clock in order to wake back up again. The Pico has an onboard temperature sensor as well as an accurate clock and timer on board. This saves you from having to purchase additional modules and sets it apart from more expensive microcontrollers. By using the onboard clock, you can shut your Pico down to a deep sleep and wake it back up again when required at certain times of the day. Number 9, Wi-Fi. The team over at Arduino have announced the new Arduino Nano RP2040 Connect, a nano-sized microcontroller using the Raspberry Pi's 2040 chip. Their development board, however, contains Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, as well as a 9-axis inertial measurement unit, in addition to an onboard microphone. The team is also currently working on porting over the current Arduino core over to the new 2040 chip, allowing users to develop for this new chip using the existing Arduino IDE and third-party libraries. And finally, at number 10, the Raspberry Pi Pico is more powerful than the Apollo 11's guidance computer that sent man to the moon. The Pico boasts 2 megabytes of onboard flash memory, whereas the Apollo 11 guidance computer only had 74 kilobytes. The Pico has 264 kilobytes of RAM, which is 66 times more than the 4 kilobytes of the guidance computer. The guidance computer had a clock speed of 1 MHz, whereas the Pico runs at 133 MHz. And that wraps up 10 things you might not have known about the Raspberry Pi Pico. Let me know in the comments below how many of these you did know and how many of them were new to you. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. And if you haven't already, check out my first impressions video of the Raspberry Pi Pico. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.